Okay. I believe that we are all set. I think all the audio is going correct. We have the interpreter set up. We are streaming, and hopefully Ekadashi technology will be cooperative with us.
Oh, you're having Ekadashi today?
Yeah. So it's Ekadashi from our end, so.
Okay. Here it's still tomorrow, so.
Okay, so you'll probably be fine.
Let's see. To the best of my knowledge, we'll be fine.
Okay. So I want to welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming. Today we have the good fortune to hear from Kamalaksa. He is a very nice devotee from Finland, who I was happy to meet many years ago. It's probably been at least a decade, right?
Has to be a decade, yeah.
Yeah. The only time I ever met him in person was in Odarya at the opening of Gaur Vijay Mandir. But as probably all of you have been, I've been reading he and Krishnangi's comics, and my kids this week they read the Das Avatar. My little girl, 7-year-old, she loves those books, the little Bhakti Yoga dictionary. So anyway, we're very happy to have Kamalaksa Prabhu here to hear about his story. I'm going to attempt to share his biography, which in his unique style, he sent a cartoon that he and Krishnangi did. So I'm going to put it up on the screen if I do this right. Kamalaksa, could you read it? It would be about coming in your voice.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. And if you want, I can give short commentaries just to.
That'd be great.
Okay, wonderful. So let's see.
Give me 1 second here.
Sure, no worries.
Is that working?
Yeah, at least on my end, I'm seeing page number 1. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, the title says it all. Of course, here you have our Krishnangi's and my secular name, or my surname. Actually, everyone knows me by my surname in the world. And Kaisa is, of course, Krishnangi, and she's the artist. Okay. So, yeah, the title says it all. Okay. So, I was born. I think that's as much as we can say about that image. Okay, so after that, as every unfortunate child, I too was sent to school. And I thought it was quite boring. And this, I think, is one of the main reasons, actually, that I turned to bhakti. I found most things quite boring. Okay, but what did I do to pass time at school? I took out my pens and my papers, and I would draw comics in class to tune out the boring things the teachers were speaking about. And this, of course, will attest to my academic accomplishments, which are very limited, to be honest. Okay, so as we can see, this speaks about that. My grades in school weren't that great. I was just in the middle. I wasn't terrible, but I wasn't exemplary either. So I kind of just rolled with the punches, I think is the saying you use. Okay, so my parents loved me nonetheless. In our family, we didn't have a lot of academic stress put on the kids. So as long as we kind of passed the grades and went from one class to the next, that was good enough. And in Finland, we have the gradation system from 4 to 10 and 7, as seen on this paper that my father holds in his hand. That's exactly in the middle. So I kind of was very much in the middle of everything. Okay, so things that weren't boring, of course, was skateboarding, and this was one of the big passions in my life. I still today strongly identify as a skateboarder, even though I haven't been standing on my board again for, well, almost a decade, I think. But there's something about the mentality of a skateboarder that starts looking at the world through a different lens, and you start seeing things in the cityscape that ordinary mortals do not see. And this was a revelation and also a lot of fun. And here is my brother and me skateboarding and skating. We were hanging out in the streets and annoying grown-ups and stealing plywood. And this is kind of the teenager mentality I still carry with me to this day, even though I try to steal a little bit less these days. But we couldn't even understand that plywood would be stealing. We just picked them up at construction sites as there would be our personal lockers or something.
You made ramps out of them?
We made jump ramps, we made banks, whatever we thought of, yeah. And of course, once you immerse yourself in a culture like skateboarding, you pretty quickly it's a slippery slope, and for me, skateboarding quickly led to punk rock, and this was another super interesting thing for me. I grew up in an environment which was, I would say, more upper middle class, and again, I'm repeating myself, but quite boring. And in punk rock, I found the energy and the creativity that I had been looking for, as well as something else, and we'll come to that, I think, in the upcoming images.
And I noticed the little straight edge X's on the hands here.
That's true. Yeah, I actually didn't even
Black Flag t-shirt.
Yeah, it's some time since we made this show, so I had forgotten about the X's. But yeah, it was kind of interesting for me if we go back to the straight edge thing, that for me, I was never into any drug, alcohol, tobacco, anything. That's I have no explanation, but it just bore zero interest for me. And then one day, someone in the punk scene said, "So you're straight edge?" And I was like, "What?" I'd never heard the term. I didn't know anything about it, but they explained to me that a straight edge person is one who doesn't indulge in drugs and so forth. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And kind of then in the Finnish punk rock scene, I think I was among the 1 or 2 straight edge people. There popped up a few later on, but in the beginning it was more oh yeah, I found my identity just by stumbling upon it. And that's kind of the story of my life in so many aspects. Okay, so punk rock, as those perhaps not that familiar with the culture, speaks about the ills of the world quite a lot. And through punk rock, I came to understand that things weren't always as they should be in this world. And this, of course, when I was a teenager, 15, 16, was quite naive still, I would say, in the black and white understanding of how the world should be. But then again, I think every teenager has the perfect answer to how to fix all the ills in the world. And I was no different. And the Shastra of these punk rock records gave me all the power in the world to be a warrior of justice. As you can see, I very eagerly that's another aspect of me that's quite obvious to anyone who knows me. Whatever I take an interest in, I'm very keen to share this information. And this is something, I know some people say that I have this autistic trait, that I'm super focused on a few things and then I immerse myself in them and also then share it. And that's, again, something that's helped me a lot in my life. I think it's been more a blessing than a curse, even though sometimes people tell me I might be a little too much. And this is the way of the world. Even though I might know the absolute truth, it's not always received that enthusiastically by others. So yeah, I hit my head against the wall a few times, and again, an ongoing process in my life. Okay. So as shown many slides ago, I was always drawing, and one thing that I've come to realize much later on is that I'm really quite a talentless person. I don't have any particular talents except one. And this talent kind of makes up for all of my other shortcomings. And this is the talent to somehow be able to surround myself always with people who are more talented and more intelligent and more exemplary in any way than I would ever be. But somehow I'm able to stay in their midst and be able to work with them. And this is something, again, I see from day to day. And well, my relationship with Krishna is a testament to this thought. Okay, so I was able to graduate. I spent 12 years in school and I got a white hat. That's something you get in Finland when you graduate from, I don't know, well, we have 9 grades of basic school and then 3 years of what we call gymnasium. So once you get from those 3 years, you get a white hat, and I have a white hat now somewhere. I never wore it after the day I received it, but it was very important for my parents that I had this hat. And I remember being very like militantly straight edge also at this time. So my parents, of course, they wanted to have a big party and invite everyone there. And I said, okay, I'll go along with this, even though I kind of didn't like parties, but I said, that's fine. But should I see a single drop of alcohol in this party, I will leave immediately and they will have the party without me. So then we just served some like really horrible green soft drink that I was particularly fond of at the time. Okay, so here is another, I wouldn't say life-changing event, but an educational event in my life. In Finland, there's the mandatory military service, and it lasted, when I was doing it, it was either 8 months or 11 months. And I had quite big disagreements with my father. I would have wanted to do the civil service, but for him, it was quite important that I would go to the army. He had probably his own reasons. I never got into those that much, but in the end, I agreed that I'd try it out for a few weeks, and if it didn't fit, then I'd quit. But in the end, actually, it was a very good experience for me, I would say, in many ways. But again, even though I was in the army, I still had this feeling that things in the world weren't as they should be. And this was something that I was thinking a lot about, and I think that's quite a common thing for a teenager to go through. But for me, I was trying to figure things out. And one thing that changed at this point was that I realized that the world wasn't the problem as such, but I was the problem myself. So I needed to change myself before I tried to change the world. And yeah, that's basically, I was more the problem than the world was the problem. So I was always looking for practical ways of doing some improving, and one quite like obvious thing was turning vegetarian. I had already made up my mind that I would become vegetarian after the military service, but once there, I was thinking that what the hell, why not do it immediately? Why try to push it into some distant future? So I went to the doctor and I got a written note from the military doctor saying that I'm a vegetarian, that I then took to the kitchen, and then I just remember when I was at the doctor and he was asking me about these things, that just, so you're becoming a vegetarian, and do you eat fish? And I was like, no, fish, of course not, it's an animal. And then he was asking, well, how about eggs? Do you eat eggs? And then I became very hesitant because I wasn't sure whether or not vegetarians eat eggs. But to err on the side of caution, I said, no eggs either. So dairy products, that's okay, but eggs are not okay. So I actually, somewhere in the Finnish military records is a note saying that I'm officially a vegetarian.
Was there anybody else who was a vegetarian?
Not to the best of my knowledge at that time. We had like a separate table for those who had like food allergies, and I was seated by them. But actually, like, it was received quite well. Like no one, like, of course, like when you're with a bunch of guys, someone might be teasing you, but there wasn't like any serious like questioning of this. That more it was like, oh, so you're a cow now or something. But I was actually surprised how well everyone around me took this change. And at this time, of course, I had already come in contact with the devotees, and I was reading Prabhupada's books, and I had gotten the most peculiar book, I think, Easy Journey to Other Planets, and I was trying to read it to the other guys in my room that we were living together, 12 guys. And again, very interesting times. Perhaps not the best introductory book in the early 90s, but okay. So despite my different quirks, I was actually promoted to Lance Corporal for exemplary military behavior. And this is something that Krishnagi thinks is the most horrible thing that one can be called, but I kind of like the idea that I was exemplary in something. Okay, so after having finished my military service, I went for a while to the university. I studied sociology and social psychology and psychology, but actually I went to the classes, I listened to them, but and I kind of enjoyed listening to these intelligent people, but the books I never got into, so I didn't pass any courses, and that became a problem. So it didn't really work out, and I more or less I joined the Hare Krishnas. This, of course, this presentation is something I show my students, so that's the way they understand it. And yeah, I had come in contact with the devotees, and it had been like the most interesting and inspiring bunch of people I had met in my life, I think, as a group. So I wanted to somehow be part of that. And in no time, I was singing and dancing in the streets, which of course in Finland at that time was considered, I think still would be considered quite crazy, but quite fun. My mother, she wasn't all too happy about me quitting my university career and hanging out with the crazy Hare Krishna people. My mother, of course, was a stewardess. She was flying all around the world, and she had seen a lot of Hare Krishnas, and her opinion of them wasn't all that high, I would dare say. So her son becoming a devotee wasn't like the best thing. So she enrolled me in art school, and I of course opposed, but being the good son that I am, in the end I agreed again to give it a shot. So as you see, I'm quite agreeable in these situations. And this was actually the first time in my life that I kind of felt that I fit in a school environment. Here I had around me people who were much alike me, even though we were quite different. We came from different backgrounds, we had different like preferences in many things, but there was some like creative energy that bound us together. So I loved it in art school, and I actually tried to make them not pass me. I wanted to stay there, but I had a much more wise teacher than I will ever be, and she understood that when it's time for the small bird to fly off out of the nest, and she very gently kicked me out of art school with decent grades. Okay, so then my actual worst fears in life came true. I had to get a job, and I got a job at a local newspaper. I was making these small ads that the companies from around wanted to advertise in the paper. So I was making those, and it was actually quite a lot of fun in the beginning. I learned a lot, and I had good co-workers, but again, in the end, it was work, and my like one big aim in life has been to never work. So this was a little bit of a temporary setback, but I got over it, as you'll see. Okay, so I think I worked for 9 months, perhaps a year, just enough to gather money so that I could print another comic book. This one made completely and only by me. And this was a comic book called Jaganatswamy comics, where I tried to explain the philosophy of Krishna consciousness to people. And I had this printed. I think I printed out 4,000 copies of it, and I quit my job and packed my dad had a little Honda that he let me use. So I packed the little Honda Civic with magazines and went around Finland selling them in the street. So you might say that these moves I've made haven't been very career orientated, and that's very much the truth. I have never had a plan in life, and I've just kind of like stumbled upon things. And I think the longest job application I've ever done is I called up a school and said I could come there and teach, and then they fixed things for me. So for those that don't know me, I'm a teacher. I teach graphic design, which basically means that they pay me to hang around with a lot of creative and interesting people. And yeah, I couldn't imagine a better way to spend one's time. And amid all of this, I was also able to find myself a wife, Krishangi. You know, all know her much better than me. Actually, in when I have one funny anecdote. I was going to an art supply store to get something, and I paid them with my credit card, and the lady at the counter looked at my credit card and said, "Christopher Leka," which is my civilian name, "are you the husband of Kaisa Leka?" So I'm officially the like trophy husband. People know Krishangi, they probably won't know me, and that's fine by me. Krishangi says that it's the scale of inequality that so many women have suffered throughout history behind great men. So she is now balancing the scale by having me be the like background figure. Okay, so together I think we've been together for 20 plus years now, and we still to this day we continue what we started out when we first met. We write and publish things, and that's really like the lifeline for us. We do a lot of stuff together, but always in the background we have two things. We have Krishna consciousness and we have publishing, and whatever like way life throws us at us, these are always present to one extent or another. Yeah, so all things considered, my life turned out pretty nice after all. And here you can see me in one of my favorite activities, taking naps. And this is also a thing I've more and more tried to cultivate lately, is inefficiency. So okay. Yeah, that sums up that part of the presentation.
Okay.
So what else would you like to know?
That was wonderful. Thank you for it was very humorous, and I like the little extra details. So maybe if we could go back and you could expand a little more. Do you feel like there was anything? I know you spoke some about being bored in school and finding nothing interesting, but is there any significant events in your life that you feel like drew you towards meeting devotees, taking the path of bhakti?
Well, there are a number of ways to answer that. My first like initial reaction would be no, like there wasn't any particular life-changing event. It was more like a gradual thing. But another way of answering that question was how I came in contact with the devotees. Is that the first Hare Krishna temple in Finland was just a few blocks from where I was living.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were about 7 or 8, perhaps 9 years old. There was a like bunch of kids around that time, and someone had gotten a flyer from the devotees that you could get a free meal of vegetarian food. Mm-hmm. And at that time we thought that's the most insane thing. Why would someone be a vegetarian? Because hot dogs were the perfect thing in life. So we decided to go and make fun of the crazy people, and they had the temple in the basement. So we thought that, well, once we went down there, we were a little bit scared because we thought the crazy people might abduct us or something. But basically, we were just there to heckle the poor devotees. And
this was you were that young?
I think I was around like I couldn't have been more than 9 at tops. Yeah. So we went there to just make fun of devotees and refused to eat anything and just like were quite ill-behaved kids, I would say. But again, as you know, Krishna has his way of taking revenge on behavior like this. So
and little samskars too.
well, perhaps yeah, there was something that like drew me. Like I there was a side of me that always like would make fun of devotees, but when I was in school, when I had to do some like reports on religion, for instance, I would always go to the temple to interview them. And even though I did it in jest, I would say something drew me there, even though I thought they were completely nuts. And yeah.
Was your family at all religious, or?
As most families in Finland, we're like, I would say we're Lutheran, but it wasn't anything that was ever practiced more than we would go to church on Christmas and should there have been a wedding or a funeral that would take place in the church. I went to, again, partially against my will, I went to this, it's called in Finland confirmation camp. You go for a week and you learn the basic things of the Christian faith, and then you get some award for that. But I wouldn't say my family was particularly religious, and again, getting into punk rock as a teenager, most punk rockers are quite critical of religion, and that kind of rubbed off on me as well. So I had this like quite short and not that deep atheist phase, but that was more like just a reaction against the perceived hypocrisy and corruption of any religious institution. And
sure.
And again, yeah, that wasn't like a brilliant career move and didn't last that long.
Yeah, I mean, I had very similar experience and kind of same path, getting into punk rock and feeling like you have all the answers and
yeah.
Stealing plywood and skateboarding. But,
exactly. I listened to your interview, so I gathered as much that we have like much in common even from the pre-devotee days.
Yeah. So do you feel like there was anything like anything in particular that led up to meeting the devotees, that like internal qualities or questions that, like, when you met the devotees, everything kind of clicked? Or
I wouldn't say everything clicked when I met the devotees, but I had, again, as a teenager, I was always interested in different outlooks on life, and I was reading. We had a New Age bookshop, again, a few blocks from where we lived. So I got the Tao Te Ching, I think it's pronounced, the Taoist book, and I still have it in my bookshelf. I very much liked it. And then I was going through my parents' bookshelf, and at some point I found the Buddhist scripture, the Dhammapada, there. And that really made a strong impact on me, because in it were quite clear like instructions. You shouldn't like hurt anyone. Everyone fears death. You shouldn't kill or cause others to be killed. So I had some like vague notion of Eastern spirituality being something that I was drawn towards. And I think people learned about that, and I then, through punk rock, through Shelter, the Hare Krishna like hardcore band, I got more into also Krishna consciousness. But it was a little bit of a like threshold for me to actually go to the temple. It was a little bit scary, but I had a friend who drove me there, and he refused to come in.
Was it still close by?
At this point, actually, it had moved, and it's an interesting story, at least for me, interesting that I really, pre-internet days, things weren't that simple. So I remembered seeing some small poster on some public like signboard by the railway station. I went there and I tore away all the other flyers, and I actually found underneath that if you're interested in Krishna consciousness, here's the address you can go to. And I actually went there, but unfortunately that was a temple they had moved away from. So I came to an empty house, and I was asking the neighbor a little bit. I wanted to know what kind of people they are. So I was like, well, were they nice or were they crazy? And the neighbor was like, no, they were harmless. They were quite nice. So then I again gathered a little bit more courage and continued my search for the temple.
So you said you had a friend who introduced you, or
actually, I had a friend who had a car, so he drove me to the temple, which was a little bit outside the like central Helsinki area, which is where I was living, the capital of Finland.
Okay.
So he drove me there, and but he refused to come inside. He said he'll wait in the car. He'll wait here 15 minutes. So I went inside, and I stumbled my way to the kitchen, and I met this very wonderful devotee, Madana Mohini Dasi, who for me at that point was an older lady and an older devotee. She was 30 something at that point. But she seemed really happy and happy to see me, even though we had never seen each other. A few of my questions, and then gave me a bag of cinnamon buns to take along with me. So this was the kind of prasadam I got hooked on quite quickly. And yeah, that was just like the so welcoming and nice atmosphere that I came into, kind of gave me again more encouragement to pursue this path. And again, at this time, I had just like by total chance met an American girl who was an exchange student in Finland at the time, and her boyfriend was also into Krishna consciousness, so she was a little bit interested in it. And I met her at some concert, and having like the X's on my hand, she noticed that I'm straight edge, and she hadn't like met another straight edge person in Finland, so she came and spoke with me, and we then made a pact to visit the temple whenever possible, and that kind of like also helped me that I had some support with me should things go the wrong way.
So this was before your military service, correct?
This was like actually during my military service. So in the time I was doing my military service, I would be there from Monday to Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday, I would have the time off. So perfect for attending the Sunday feast. And yeah, and I was like, I remember coming to the first class, and I remember the devotee giving the class, and I didn't understand much of anything, which is quite a given. I remember him giving some examples that I thought were a little bit silly, and then something a little bit misogynistic also, which I reacted upon. But other than that, I thought it was a nice experience. But when the like plate of prasadam came, I was totally blown away. I had never been into eating. Like I always viewed eating as something that's mandatory to kind of keep you going. But I couldn't comprehend that something this good could exist. So again, that was one thing that just like had me instantly hooked, I can say. So yeah, did I answer your question? I'm a little bit scattered brain here.
No, that's great. So then that was just a regular occurrence through your military service. So were you living on some kind of base in some kind of military quarters, or were you?
I lived on during the weeks. I was in the military quarters, and that was like some 70 miles from Helsinki, where I lived at that time at my parents' house. And yeah, during the weekends on Friday night, I would come from there, and then I would, as much as possible, seek the company of devotees. I was quite impressed by them. I had grown so tired of the punk rock scene, which had these high ideals, but then all that people did, and this is again my personal experience, might be different for others, but they would just do the same things that the people in the world I wanted to escape did, but they just did it like in the mode of ignorance. So the same drinking, the same, like, for me at that time, I felt just pointless debating without any action kept going on. And when I came to the devotees, I was so impressed about the, like, again, creative energy and the like, really like turning your beliefs into action, that I couldn't help but be drawn towards that. And I also very, very much liked the idea of this disciplined lifestyle.
So so you go through your military time, and then did you ever try to move into the temple, or
once I got,
did you want to kind of go ahead?
Again, yeah, you make it sound like it would have been a conscious decision on my part, and I've come to realize that I've made preciously few conscious decisions in my life, and again, I kind of like just went along and with life. So I would go every morning. I would try to go to the temple. At this point, once I was done with my military service, the temple had actually moved back to the center of Helsinki. So now it was like, I would say, a 15-20 minute walk for me.
Oh.
So this of course made me really happy, and this was a very like good time, I would say, in the Finnish Krishna consciousness movement, because so much was happening, and there was a real energy of like, we're taking over the world kind of vibe to it. And I just remember like there were so many like nice people there. I was this week, and I went to Brussels to the comic book festival there, and I met an old friend. I hadn't met him in probably 15 years, who was a devotee living at the temple at the time. And he was such a wonderful devotee, still a super nice guy this day. And I kind of latched onto him and a few other of the same age as me, and that kind of like also made the bond stronger to the temple. And just remembering like going there, I would skateboard to Mangalarati, which was at 5 a.m, and people were leaving the bars, coming home completely drunk and walking a little bit wobbly in the street, and I was skateboarding towards them on my way to the temple. And I remember thinking about the verse in the Bhagavad Gita about the self-realized soul, the nighttime for the normal people, and the self-realized person seeing that from a different perspective. So this, of course, was very like practical Bhagavad Gita experience for me.
So then it sounds like a lot of in kind of beginning exposure to Krishna consciousness, to the path of bhakti, inspiring, like is pretty typical. A lot of kind of overwhelming.
Yeah,
I found it,
yeah,
really confirming kind of experiences. Were there any challenges, doubts, confusion, problems that you encountered as you started practicing?
I would say the few problems that I had, that they came later on. Well, one thing I remember about was that going to the temple, I was feeling so happy that one doubt arose in my mind. I was thinking, I cannot be this happy unless they're putting drugs in the food. So this was my big fear, that they were drugging me to keep me happy. And of course, it's true to a certain extent. Yeah, exactly. So I was just thinking, I cannot be this happy. There needs to be some problem going on. But really, that thought didn't last that long. But I remember thinking that thought very like strongly. I wouldn't say there were problems as such. I just like I was taken in by a bunch of wonderful people. I remember helping out in the kitchen quite a lot in the beginning, and I would stand there for hours on end doing dishes, and I was like, this is the best thing in life. I'll never leave this place. That there can't be any greater joy than washing the dishes.
I've had those experiences.
Yeah, and it's like it's good to speak with someone who knows it, because if you would tell an ordinary person that I was so happy washing the dishes, they would think like you're ready for a mental institution. But yeah, I was just so happy to have the company of the devotees. That was like,
yeah. So, and then so I understood you went from your military service, then you kind of went to tried university.
yes.
Did your mother in her experience as a flight attendant, did she say anything, like what were her conversations with you like about the devotees, and
Well,
how did some of that go, the back and forth?
again, we're approaching some like vague risk of some Vaishnava parade, but I'll tell you an example. She said that her view of the devotees was that you flipped over a rock and some like pale thing came crawling out, and that was her view of the devotees, that they were like these pale looking people, malnourished and yeah, a little bit brainwashed. That was her take. But it wasn't like at no point did my parents like try to forbid me of going to the temple. They were, I mean, I can appreciate now that they were worried. I mean, I was a stupid 19-year-old. Of course they were worried, but never did they like try to dismiss me in any way or like threaten me in any way. So I had the fortune of having loving parents in that sense. I remember at one time sitting in the car with my dad, or we were the entire family was in the car, and I was explaining something about Krishna conscious to my dad, and he said, "You've become a fanatic," and that made me so proud. Yes, I'm a fanatic. That's what you should be in life. That's the best thing you can be. So his like genuine worry for me was a badge of honor.
Rather than, you're saying kind of rather than be blandly into something just because you have to be like full on.
Yeah. So I especially like a fanatic. I thought that's something really cool. and I remember also another time I was riding. Usually like these discussions with my father took place in a car for one reason or another, but we were driving somewhere, and he turned to me and said that he thought that his worst nightmare in life would be that his son would become a Hare Krishna. But now one of his sons is a Hare Krishna and the other one is a terrorist. And this was my brother getting into the animal rights movement and participating in some of these things. So he had like, we really like schooled my dad on during that time.
Tortured him. Both his sons became his worst nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. Like he would have seen quite a different path for us through life, but for some reason both he and my mother have always been supportive of us, even though they were worried sick. I mean, we did some quite stupid things in retrospect. So I mean, they were right in many things, but their views of devotees, I think, were wrong.
So then, so you eventually became a teacher and were teaching graphic design. That's where Guru Nishta went to school, right? With you?
Yeah. That I'm now teaching at a different school. I'm teaching at a higher level, but Guru Nishta was my student. Yes. So he came to study under me.
And I've seen, I mean, I've mostly known you for like photography back when I met you. What is there, can you share with us some of like your interest in, like, what's your particular media of art that you like to do, or how are you involved in graphic design and I guess through the publishing?
Yeah. So I've always like had this love of the printed media. That's my main love in life, I would say.
I remember hearing you were a Fontosaurus.
Yeah. I've been known to like be fanatical about typography as well, and that's kind of like perhaps the autistic traits that I get super into something, and just I'm able to focus quite intently on that. So I actually was on the radio, the public broadcasting radio, a week or two ago, speaking about typography. So people kind of know me for knowing fonts, and I get like people get in touch with me asking, what's this typeface and what's that typeface? And I'm quite often, more often than not, I'm able to help them out. So yeah, I'm, and graphic design for me, it's like, it's the thing I love the most in life, I would say. And particularly for me, I think it's the ability to communicate through like visual means. That's the thing. I'm not into high art that much, because for me it's so open-ended. It's so ambiguous. I have something to say, and through graphic design, I'm able to express myself in ways I would otherwise not be. And then also it allows me to work together with the most talented people imaginable. And again, my role in the equation is more that like of the creative director. Other people do the right stuff, and I just kind of bring them together and serve as an kind of conductor.
Yeah.
Well, one example, for instance, was I've been blessed to have some amount of money, and for instance, Brigu was writing his book on Ekadashi. So when I learned about this, I told him that you write a book this crazy, and I'll be crazy enough to publish it. So whenever someone has something that I feel inspired about, I insert myself in one way or another. And we've been working with Brigu also on quite a few projects, and yeah, that's been a learning experience for me as well. One book in particular that I thought was the craziest project was Brigu wrote a book called Sadbhuj Ashtakam, which is entirely in Sanskrit. So this is the only book in Finland that's ever published in Sanskrit. And when he told me about it, I was like, I mean, you write that book and I'll publish it. And yeah. So for me, I have like a particular love for crazy projects. The crazier, the better, usually. Again, going back perhaps to the punk rock ideals of doing something different.
But you've out of that, you've produced such unique, inspiring projects, like the devotee comics you've put out, and that I've had people recently even pull out the little bhakti yoga book.
Yeah, the little book of bhakti.
And ask me what it is, and look through it, and devotees, and they're super impressed. They think it's such a good idea.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. For me, it's interesting because when we go to these comic book conventions, people come up to us and they have zero interest in yoga, zero interest in bhakti, but they might just pick up this book because they find it intriguing looking. And that's something that I try to bring to the table. Like it's written by Brigu, it's illustrated by Krishangi, so they've done the heavy lifting. I've just like then compiled it into a like book format. But for me, it's such an interesting thought that the way we package something will help people to appreciate it. And that's something that I try to bring to the table, that making things beautiful and interesting looking might lower the threshold for people to somehow get in touch with bhakti. And I think that's something we've succeeded in quite well.
Yeah, you really seem, especially you and Krishangi, seem like a very compatible, great team, each one kind of augmenting the other, so that you can produce these great works of art. And do you want to share any? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, when I speak with my students, I usually present the two of us working together in the way that Krishangi is the workhorse. She really she does the heavy lifting. She really puts the work in, and I'm more of a like fluttering butterfly who just like, I go out on walks and come up with different ideas and then come back and tell her, Krishangi, we need to do a book like this. So now you do it, and then I'll come up with the next idea. And once I get bored, I come up with a new book idea. So this is something that is slowly driving Krishangi crazy, but I think we have something like 5 or 6 books planned already that we just need to realize.
Well, it's really working. Do you want to share anything from the time of, say, your teaching in graphic design to meeting Guru Maharaj to the present, about kind of how your practice has changed or realizations you've had that have kind of kept you going?
Yeah. Well, one thing that keeps me going is that there's so much to learn. There's so much going on that it'll take me a couple of lifetimes to wrap my head around even the basics. I remember Guru Maharaj coming to our home and staying here for a retreat at one time. And I think this was the first time he came to Finland, actually. And we went on a walk, and I told him that if someone would have asked me 1 year or 2 years earlier, tell me about Krishna consciousness, I would have given an answer. It's like this, it's like this, it's like this. And I thought I understood everything. I knew everything. But once I started listening to Guru Maharaj and attending his classes and becoming his follower, I realized I understand nothing. I know nothing. And when I told him this during our walk, he just smiled and says, "Yes, now you're making progress." So that's one thing that really like stuck with me, that I thought I had it all figured out. I would have been able to draw like a graph that this is Krishna consciousness, when I understood nothing. And another thing that impressed me when Guru Maharaj was coming over to our place was during a class, one devotee told him that, yes, I'm just trying to understand the basics. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the like, I'm not this body stuff. And then Guru Maharaj quite sternly told that, no, this is not enough. We need to study, we need to learn the philosophy, we need to listen, and we need to like engage ourselves in this process. It's not that just we can lazily stand back and say, I'm trying to figure out the basics. That won't stand. So that kind of was like also an important moment for me, understanding that, wow, here we're really like, we're really moving towards something much bigger.
Nice. Would you say, because we're running low on time, is there anything, are there any particular insights or Archana would call it, gifts from your journey that really impacted you that you'd like to share with everyone?
Yes, I've come to understand that my engagement in bhakti has been more despite of my own efforts than because of them, meaning that I haven't been able to like really do anything worthwhile, but somehow I've had the good fortune of constantly having devotees more intelligent, more talented, more progressive than me surround me, and I've been able to somehow hang on to them, and that's my big take. I like Archana City. I think Archana City usually spoke about this like these interviews as the hero's journey, but as I told you, for me it's more the fool's journey. It's like I've just like stumbled upon the perfect thing and somehow been allowed to stay in touch with it.
Well, it's that luck, and the luck comes from surrounding yourself with good people and sadhus.
That's true.
So I'd like to ask if does anybody have any questions for Kamalaksha today? You can either type it in the chat, or if Akura has any questions from any of the Spanish speakers.
Yes. Unfortunately, they are all in English. We're a really small publishing house, and we have a very limited ability to publish books. So we've chosen English as the kind of Esperanto, and yeah, you'll just have to do with that. And if you want something published in Spanish, my instruction is publish something yourself. And I say this as a like with a loving heart. I think people should, and this was something that really inspired me when I came in touch with the devotees, was how actively you could participate yourself, how like much encouraged it was at the time to use your own voice, and that's something that's really like helped me in life quite a lot. Now there's a long question and I don't understand a word.
Akura, can you, yeah, if you could translate Brajahari's question.
Yeah, well, I understand it, I think, to some extent. And for me, as a graphic designer, I'm different from like a free artist. So I always have an objective I want to achieve. That's the thing that speaks to me in graphic design. It's not like just subjective interpretation first and foremost, but it's conveying a message. And then you have to ask what's the best method to convey this message, taken into consideration my financial situation, my abilities, technical abilities, and artistic abilities, and go with it from there. I would say it's so individual. What speaks to you? What way do you want to speak about, for instance, in my case, Krishna consciousness to people? And I've ever since I've learned reading, comic books were the one thing I loved, and I thought this is the perfect medium because there's this Japanese samurai author who said that things of great concern should be treated lightly. And this is a truth I've come to accept quite strongly in my life, that comic books, they seem as such an innocent art form and something like for kids. So the guards, the walls people put up might not be as high when it comes to comics as it would come to just hitting them in the head with a Bhagavad Gita, which like has the weird Sanskrit and everything. So for me, it's just like, I'm not a particularly well-read person, so comics, that suits my temperament and that works for me. And I'm thinking that there have to be other people like me out there who aren't perhaps able to read these quite difficult, deep philosophical books all the time. So comics, low threshold, democratic means of expression.
What I also think is so neat is for anybody who hasn't read any of Kamalaksa and Krishnangi's comics, is they're not simple. They're not just kind of like you were saying, people think of comics, so there's nothing to be afraid of, but it's nice because you draw people in with that kind of art form, but then there's all this nice nuance in there. It's really like when I was in college, I read Mouse.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that so much, reading that, because that was this comic format dealing with this, incredibly heavy topic, the Holocaust, and this the author's journey. So in your comics, it's really nice because there's these, it's very personal, like you're putting your lives out there, the little side conversations you have, and it's all, it's much deeper than just like, I'm just reading the Sunday comics in the newspaper.
Right. Yeah. That's the thought. And also, like, one thing, when we got initiated, Guru Maharaj had one instruction for us, and that was like, chant Hare Krishna and live a good life. So, and later on we've been speaking with Guru Maharaj, and he said that, or oftentimes in his talks, he also speaks about how giving a good example is so much more important than just like trying to explain some philosophical points. So that's what we try to do also through our comics, show that we're like just like fallible human beings, but we have found something that's so important, so profound for us. So it's an unlimited like topic for us. That's another thing. We can speak about this forever and ever.
Yeah. So I definitely want to get to Sargrahi and Sakirati and Sham have their hands up for, I assume, a question. I'm just realizing also that we didn't cover a huge topic, which is for people who don't know, Kamalaksa and Krishnangi are incredibly adventurous people. So they've been doing for years bicycle treks. Now they're kayaking, all these amazing adventures that we didn't hear anything about.
That's for another time, perhaps. Yeah, I think.
So maybe I'll have Sakirati and Sham go first.
Pranam, thank you so much for your beautiful presentation. And I really like your Kaisaleka t-shirt.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my question is, how did you get in contact with Guru Maharaj?
To be honest, I'm not completely sure of the timeline anymore, but there was this devotee in Finland, Madhu Mangal, who had been initiated by him I think we also received some of the recorded CDs through Brigu. So I think Brigu was quite a big influence in this situation. And then I think we wrote Guru Maharaj at some point and received replies, but then it kind of tapered out. And during our honeymoon, I really wanted to take Krishangi to Los Angeles and especially to Venice Beach, because this was the place I found super interesting because all the freaks would hang out there. So this was the place for our honeymoon. And while there, we also wanted to attend the Ratha Yatra, but we realized that the San Francisco Ratha Yatra is also in the same few weeks we were spending there. So we decided to pop over to San Francisco, and there we got in touch with a devotee who was Guru Maharaj's disciple at the time. Krishangi will remember his name. I can't remember it right now, but he agreed to take us up to Audarya the day before the Ratha Yatra festival, or 2 days prior to the Ratha Yatra festival. And that's actually the first time when we met Guru Maharaj in person. So we brought him some gifts, we brought him some of our publications, and he looked at them quite seriously, and we spoke for a while about different topics, and we were quite impressed by him and of course by Audarya. Especially we were impressed about how cold it can be in California. We, as Finns, we had the idea that California is this place of bikinis and palm trees, and we were freezing like crazy over there. That's a side point. But the next day, Guru Maharaj then asked us that could you speak with him again? And we had told him that we would like him to come over to Finland to speak. And he the second day he asked us to speak with him, and he said that it would be more comfortable for him should he had some disciples in Finland. And we were like, yeah, of course, but we can't guarantee anything. We can host you. And then he told us that, no, I want to initiate you. And both me and Krishangi were like, that's a terrible idea. That's a horrible idea. And we gave him many reasons why he shouldn't initiate us. But again, he saw something in us that to this day I might not be able to see, but he's quite persistent, as you know. So the next morning we were initiated, and I remember I was also always a little bit at that time a little bit averse to the ritualistic side of Krishna consciousness. That was something that was a little bit foreign for me, something I've come to appreciate much more later on now. But I remember being so happy in a sense to be initiated, wearing these old, quite dirty jeans and an old hooded sweater with so little ceremony. It was just in the morning, Guru Maharaj said, oh, by the way, we have some additional initiations this morning. And it was a quite informal setting, and yeah, perfect for me, at least, I have to say. I have such nice memories of that event as well.
Nice. Saragrahi?
Haribol, Kamalaksa Prabhu.
Haribol.
I'm wondering, when will the next issue of Jaganatswamy comics come out? Because of course, since you have formed this wonderful tag team with Krishangi, she's been doing the drawing and you've been doing to some extent the writing. But,
yes.
and that has worked, of course, wonderfully. But I can't help missing your drawing as well. So I'm wondering, do you secretly draw a little bit still,
of course I draw. Yeah, of course I draw something, doodles more and something small. I was just funnily enough, preparing for this interview, I went through my old diaries and I found some drawings from there.
Did you show us some?
They're upstairs, so it might take some time for me to locate. But if you have the time, I can run up and get them.
Sure, I'd love to see some of yours.
let's see. I'm just trying to remember it. But yeah, you'll have to give me a minute or two to locate them. So
Yeah.
yeah, speak about some more interesting topics now.
Brigupad, when is the next volume of the Little Book of Bhakti Yoga coming out?
I don't know. Actually, somebody asked about that book recently, and I think it might be out of print. So maybe we should do a new print of it, I think.
Uh-huh.
You have to try to get Kamalaksa to agree to that.
But second part would be also a good idea. Second part
Yeah.
with something else in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Good stuff.
Also, we should remind everyone that on Saturday, Brigupad will give a class
Oh yeah.
for Bhaktivinoda Appearance Day.
Great. And also next week, Brigupad is the interviewee.
Okay, so I couldn't
Right.
find my more recent notebook, but here's a drawing, for instance, of Krishangi working on one of our books and me by
Oh, wow.
behind her. So that's something that I've drawn. And
Yeah.
what I'm saying there is I don't understand. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the style I'm working in, quite detailed, and that's something I've also forced Krishangi to adopt more, like a detailed way of doing artwork. And yeah,
Mhm.
Krishangi is of the two of us, she is very system orientated, and she always wants to do things in a particular manner that's predetermined. And I'm more like the chaotic type that always wants to mix things up, and that's another part of our relationship.
Again, compatible. So
Yeah.
that works
So
well
Brigo's
together.
question: when's the next issue of Jaganatswamy comics coming out? That might take one life or two.
Well, you can add to your list of projects. I was asking him when's the next Little Book of Bhakti Yoga Volume 2 coming out. So
Actually, this is one thing that I already have everything planned out, but we've been speaking with Ananda Mai about it. We have the project is all set. I just need to twist her arm to start doing her part.
you said Anandamayi?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So, and Brigu has also approved of this idea. It would be like an completely independent sequel to the Little Book of Bhakti Yoga. But should Ananda Mai hear this, I'm coming for you.
Okay. We'll end with that threat.
Good. That's perfect.
Just in the chat, Surata Chandana Charchini Devi Dasi says, cool, you are artist the same that my son, your history very nice.
Okay. Jai Radhe.
Jai Radhe. Thank you very much for coming, Kamalaksha Prabhu. It was wonderful to have you and to hear more of your story. And we will see everybody next week.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Haribol.
Signing off. Haribol.